Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Clinical Reference Labs received FDA emergency use authorization of a COVID at home saliva test back in July. Joining me to discuss is Robert Thompson, CEO of Clinical Reference Laboratories. Robert, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me.
And before we get into the test, give us a brief background on CRL.
So CRL is the largest independently owned clinical laboratory in the U.S. We process approximately 400,000 to 500,000 tests a day. We're a very highly automated laboratory focused traditionally on the business-to-business market, not so much like Quest and LabCorp servicing physicians.
How does the CRL Rapid Response saliva test work? Is the turnaround in a reasonable amount of time? And how dependent is it on the person conducting it properly at home?
So that's the key, is that saliva is a very simple matrix to collect. So rather than having to swab your nose, you just spit into a tube. And then at the end of when you reach the fill line, then you seal the device and send it into the laboratory. So it's very simple. I had a 4 and a 6-year-old here doing it the other day. All I had to do was bribe them with some ice cream, but they were able to do it. And our turnaround time, once it gets to the laboratory, which it comes in priority overnight, so we get it at about 6 o'clock in the morning. Most of our tests, about 90%, the last time I looked, are done within 24 hours, and the remainder between 24 and 48.
We keep hearing that the testing is ineffective because it's not always accurate. Why is that happening, and how confident are you with the CRL test?
So in our tests, in our studies for the FDA EUA, we showed 100% concordance with the NP swabs, the big long swabs that go up and kind of tickle your brain. So we're 100% in agreement with those. So we basically had no false positives or no false negatives when compared to that as the gold standard. I think a lot of the issues that you're seeing with false positives and false negatives relate to other assays that, as the virus is mutating, if your PCR test is targeting a piece of the virus that is mutating, eventually you will start to see false negatives.
Which organizations have signed on to use the CRL test?
So we've had a lot of activity recently with universities. And so we've been doing, for instance, Kansas University, Emporia State, Fort Hays, Missouri State, Wichita State are all active with us. We have 14 universities in total. And now it's starting to get active in the K through 12 market segment as well. So we've done several private schools, and we were recently selected as one of 2 vendors for the LA Unified School District. So we'll be involved in testing the over 750,000 students in that school district.
Can this mode of testing using saliva be used for other types of disease testing outside of COVID-19? Can it be used for other strains? Do you think we'll start to see this kind of testing versus the Q-tip up the nose testing?
I believe, and our scientists are in accordance with me, that this test can be used for most respiratory viruses. So as an example, our partner Co-Diagnostics, we're working with them to develop the test that will simultaneously test for 2 strains of flu as well as COVID. So that when we test, we're not only giving you an answer back on COVID, but we're telling you if you have the flu. And that there's been a lot of interest in that, especially in the K through 12 segment.
Yeah, you actually answered my next question, because there's a perception out there that we could potentially see a second wave in the fall and the winter with colder weather coming certainly to the Northeast. And that was my question. What if you don't feel well? I'm assuming everyone's going to go for a COVID-19 test, and if it's not that, then what is it? So it certainly makes a lot of sense to be able to decide, whether it is COVID-19 or in fact the traditional flu or cold.
From the moment we mentioned that test, there's been an enormous amount of interest in it. I mean, an enormous amount. Everybody sees the value in it, and to add those 2 tests on is just $1 or $2. It's not a lot of additional money.
Yeah, and it's better than getting the old Q-tip up the nose for a flu test. Robert, thanks so much for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.